Hi, and welcome to the Desert Lady Diaries podcast, a weekly conversation with women who found their home in the Mojave Desert. I'm Dawn Davis, and this is episode number 33. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. And if you're a returning listener, thank you so much for coming back. If you're looking for more information about the podcast, past guests, or want to catch up on previous episodes, or just want to drop me a line, it's all at the website, desertladydiaries.com. We're also on Facebook and Instagram at Desert Lady Diaries, and we're also on Twitter at Desert Lady Diary. Twitter doesn't allow enough spaces to use the full word diaries. And if you're in town, April 7th, come and see me at Mesa Madness at the Yucca Mesa Community Center from 9 to 3. I'll be up there spreading the word about the podcast. This week I'm talking to Mary Collier, who I met in the research room at the Old Schoolhouse Museum in 29 Palms. She's written 8 books. 2 of them, Earthbound and Gather the Children, were ranked numbers 3 and 4 in their genres on Amazon last week. I'm here today with Mary Collier, born in Lincoln Township, Audubon, Iowa. She began writing for the Audubon Advocate when she was 13, and her writing continued off and on for years. Mary has also worked for Nintendo of America reading, writing, and playing games. She continues to write and has a number of science fiction titles, including Twisted Tales from the Desert, which are available on Amazon, Kindle, and our own Space Cowboy Books and Joshua Tree. Mary is a member of the Desert Writers Guild of 29 Palms and is also involved with the greatest little museum in the world and writes for the Old Schoolhouse Journal. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Di.
So I always start out with, what was your very first experience with the desert?
It was when I couldn't eat, sleep, or breathe in the state of Iowa, and one doctor advised my mother to take me home and let me die. She found that a rather impossible edict to accept, and she took me west. There was a huge snowstorm that closed off the passes between L.A. and Phoenix. We had ride by a bus. We had planned on staying with friends. I walked off of the bus, and that warm, wonderful desert air hit my lungs and I could breathe. It didn't hurt. Long story short, we did remain in Phoenix. She sold the bus tickets and went to work.
Oh, wow. How long were you in Phoenix? Well, how old were you when you got there?
14.
Oh, okay.
I missed high school that year. She took me back home in the summer, and I immediately became ill again. We returned to Phoenix in the fall. I continued my high school there. Basically, it was summer in Iowa, back to Phoenix in the fall, except for my junior and senior year. 1 year I had worked, paid my own rent and everything, and 1 year they had dried out on the farm and Mother came back to work to earn money, and my father also came to earn money. I married. We lived there for quite a while, and my husband decided he was tired of baking his brains and moved me to the Northwest. It rains there 133 1/3 inches in 1 year. When I retired from Nintendo because of my husband's health, we ran back to the desert.
And when you ran back to the desert, did you run back to Phoenix, or where did you go?
We did check it out.
Mm-hmm.
However, to have what we had, we would have had to move out 30 miles away from everything because of the prices. Our daughter lived here. We decided we'd move here because the housing was far less costly.
How did your daughter come to be here?
She married a Marine. How else?
That's hilarious. So talk to me about writing for a newspaper when you were 13. How did that happen?
Oh, well, Mother had procured the job for some reason and then decided in the spring of the year she did not have time for it. So what this was a column, something like you might see in the Desert Trail from Wonder Valley, except that in that era one called people and asked if they'd visited anyone. And I would write down if they had visited anyone or somebody had visited them. If it had been a shower or a wedding reception or anything like that, my pay went up from 3 cents a line to 4 cents a line.
Oh, my goodness.
But it was strictly a township news thing.
Right. So did you ever write again for any sort of newspaper? I mean, besides now you write for the Old Schoolhouse Journal.
No, I did not.
No. Okay. And what kind of things do you write for the Journal? And for those who are listening who don't know, the Old Schoolhouse Journal is part of the Old Schoolhouse Museum in 29 Palms.
Correct.
Yeah.
What I do is I write the accessions column because I'm the archivist. So I write down what comes in and who's working for the accessions committee during the month. 3 months, that type of thing. And of course, I list what everyone has donated, because if I don't, they call me and complain that I didn't recognize them. I also write a snapshots in history, which illustrates whatever the design person has put up for exhibits.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And if she doesn't change it, there isn't a snapshots column.
Right.
When she changes it, there's a snapshots column, and it's particularly for the people that live out of town and belong to the Historical Society.
Okay, interesting. And how long have you been involved with the Historical Society in 29 Palms?
Since I moved here in 2001.
Wow, okay. How did you get introduced to it? Did you seek it out, or?
Oh, well, my husband and I both love museums. He was going to museums before I even met him, so... We both love museums. We came here, and my daughter knew we had this love of museums and took us to the old Schoolhouse Museum.
Okay.
We were just visiting, and a docent that was there mentioned something about how inconvenient something is, and I made a suggestion as how she could improve that. And she said, "Oh, you need to be a docent here when you move."
And so are you.
And so that's how I started there.
That's how you started. Okay. So tell me about because where I met you was actually is that called the research room?
It's a library room, but it is where we do most of the research, yes.
Okay, all right. And when you talk about accessions, does that mean people that have either lived there before or live there currently now decide that there's something that they have that they want to donate to the museum?
Yes.
Okay.
Or if it's an estate and people live elsewhere, but they don't want to bother, but they don't want to really throw out this wonderful old history things, we request that they bring it into us. We'll gladly take care of it all.
Sure, that's great. So what are some of the most interesting things that you've seen come in?
Ooh, that's really... Well, there's the mining equipment that's outside and the well digger. That was a big surprise, but we do have the original well digger for 29, mechanical well digger for 29 Palms. They brought it in probably about 1929, 1930, somewhere in there.
Wow.
And then there's the Bagley fountain that Frank Bagley and his wife started the original market up in what's called the Historic Plaza.
Mm-hmm.
The fountain was made from the stones that the miners would bring in to prove that they had struck something. And they would hand it to Bagley, and he'd stake them with goods to go back out, with food and supplies and so forth, to go back out and continue digging. He said that was the most expensive water fountain around. I don't know whether this is true or he's making a joke.
Oh my gosh. Were the murals up when you came in 2001?
Some of them, not all of them.
Okay.
That had started. There was actually a oasis of murals and a convention in 2000, which was prior to my coming here. The Arts Council was involved in that.
So what are some of the changes that you've seen since you came in 2001? So it's been 16 years since you've been here.
Well, there's more people, of course, not that many, but there are more people. And there's definitely California drivers, but I doubt if that's changed any. But I think the biggest thing is the mass of people that are now visiting Joshua Tree National Park. It doesn't matter what entrance you're at, the parking lot is overflowing. That's really, in a way, quite wonderful.
Yeah, it is. When you came from Iowa to the desert, besides being good for your health, were there other things that you noticed that you preferred, or that when you came, you were like, I don't know if I can be here?
I was quite delighted because my father refused to have electricity put into the house. That particular portion of Iowa did not come through the REA for whatever reason until 1950.
Wow. And
here's my 50-plus father climbing up the telephone pole because the younger farmers there didn't have guts enough to do so. I was really proud of Papa. At any rate, we had no electricity in the house. We had no bathroom in the house. We did have cold running water, but in the city you had a little switch that you flipped and the light went on, and it was a nice light. It didn't smell.
Right.
Of kerosene.
No kerosene, right.
You had water that came out of the pipe, either hot or cold. And there was a place a little room in the house where you go in and take care of all sorts of things, including a bath or a shower.
How about from the perspective of plants and flowers and wildlife and just the geography?
It was
I guess.
different, of course.
Yeah, sure.
But I didn't sneeze all the time or cough, so I welcomed it in a manner of speaking. And I loved it. And I also became quite a rock collector right now. I've lost all that knowledge because I haven't done it for years. But I had all sorts of rocks from the desert.
Oh, wow. Did you know there was a rock hound club here in the Morongo Basin?
Yes, there is. And there used to be one right in 29 Palms. But as I said, I just haven't become interested in it. It's like that was part of my life then, and it's no longer part of my life now.
Gotcha. Yeah, I wasn't aware of it. I interviewed an attorney in Yucca Valley a couple months ago, Dee Davis, and she mentioned the Rockhound Club. I had no idea that was something that...
They have a gem and mineralogy show every year in Joshua Tree.
Right, at the Sportsman. Yeah, exactly. And you guys have the Weed Show.
Yes.
Have you participated in the Weed Show?
Once. I've decided I'm going to... focus my artistic efforts on my writing and not do something that I really have no qualifications.
That's smart. Right. So let's talk about your writing. So you're writing at 13 just kind of as a fluke because your mom ran out of time.
Well, not exactly. I had already written a short story. Yeah. I went to one country schoolhouse, but it was much different than the schools today. I'd already written two short stories because of the English class. One was because we had to. For some reason, I wrote my mind was twisted even then, obviously, because I wrote about the Wandering Jew. How I ever heard that legend out in the midst of Iowa, I don't know, but that's what I wrote about. The other two girls in my class thought it was so wonderful, but they wanted a romance, which I obliged, and thought it was really very droopy. They thought it was wonderful. I have no interest in romance even then. Then, in my catechism, the pastor mentioned that the Germans started going into Texas in the 1830s and taking their faith with them. Well, my interest went way up into the air, and I started writing a novel. I had the first chapter written. I'd gone to the Post magazines, cut out the pictures of what the people looked like and everything. Oh, wow. I showed it to my brother, the near genius that was attending college, and he doubled over with laughter because I'd killed off everyone but two people in the first chapter.
Whoops.
So I sort of put that away and didn't touch it, except the story kept coming back in my mind. And I kept writing on it all through the years. It really expanded. I have had all sorts of chapters written down for all sorts of generations, but I did not finish it until after I had retired.
Oh, wow. And which book is that?
Gather the Children.
And how many books have you written in total?
8. And there are 4, well, that's the novels. There are 4 anthologies.
Okay. And how did you get inspired to do this anthology?
Well, I was at the Desert Writers Club, and we had to write these short stories because they did publish a journal every year. But they had to be desert-centric. But I had also, while I was up in Washington, written short stories. I have no idea why, but I was doing so. So the collection of stories that I wrote about the desert, many of them wound up into Twisted Tales from the Desert. Twisted Tales from the Universe has Twisted Tales from everywhere, including the Midwest. Twisted Tales from the Northwest, only tales from that location. And Twisted Tales from the Skewed Mind, once again, goes everywhere.
Were they inspired by places you had been?
Somewhat, particularly for the Northwest and the desert, yes. But as one reviewer said, that they're desert-centric, but there's stories that really could be in any location.
So would you say that the desert has inspired your work, or was it that the Desert Writing Club kind of said it needs to be about the desert
in that direction?
Right.
But
yeah.
That is one of the stories I had set in the Northwest, and I just changed it to the desert.
Oh, there you go. So I guess that's a lot of things about writing that people don't, especially if it's fiction. Sometimes if they are familiar with a place and what's in that place, but the writer kind of takes it out of context and uses it in a different way, it seems sometimes that maybe people become offended, or they think the writer, she doesn't know what she's talking about because that's not where this is, or that's not how this works here. What would you say to somebody who has that view?
Well, they may have that view, but then I'm just going to tell them their experience was different from mine. Because the stories that I set in the Northwest are pretty much along the lines of what I saw there. And when I changed that story I mentioned to the desert, I put in our desert streets and 29 Palms. I put in our plants, our own library, everything like that. Even halfway mentioned the restaurants and bars.
Okay.
So it has a definite setting. It was there. Of course, with the way stores and businesses can close around here, that means absolutely nothing, but it once was.
So what has your experience been with that, now that you're on that subject, with stores or retail or any businesses in 29 since you got here?
As long as it existed for the year I'm writing, I'm good with it.
And what do you think now, this Project Phoenix that...
Oh, I think it's wonderful. They should have done something like this long ago. It's too bad they couldn't make it as large as they wanted, and I'm looking forward to actual places to park decently, because the parking lots that they have in the back of the store now can be rather dangerous to go into with the way the pavement can be broken up or something.
Right, exactly.
So I'm quite delighted with this. I think it's an excellent idea.
That's great. Yeah, I equate it to like a main street of where I grew up in New Jersey. Because you got all these little storefronts, either they're restaurants or they're,
Yes,
in mine there was, we even had a Woolworths actually in the downtown area. But there were shoe stores and mom and pop clothing stores and restaurants and...
there was once all those things in 29 Palms. That's the
right. That's what I hear. Right. Are pictures of those things in not only the museum but in the research room? Is that what you get a lot of? Do you get a lot of?
Well, there are, of course, in the back archival room we have all the newspapers and those sort of things, and the pictures are there. Yes, but yes, we do have pictures of the businesses in the photo section,
and probably also of some of the events. What are some of the events that you've participated in since you've been here for 16 years?
Well, we show, of course, the Pioneer Days, which is a 3-day weekend thing, because of the parade and the dinners and then the gathering at the museum, which was started years and years ago by a lady named Prudy Underhill, the wife of the newspaper owner and publisher. And it was just been continued through the museum.
That's something I haven't gone to yet. There's something usually comes up, or it's at that time of the year when things really start picking up. We talked about the visitors, but it is busy.
Because it's cooled down.
Right, exactly.
And everyone has returned.
Right. I can go back now, it's cooler. What is the latest book that you've written?
The Silver and the Green. It is a sequel to Man True Man, but it was my way to explore a culture rebuilding itself after it had been totaled out, but it's a culture that's not ours. They have their own legends and their own way of believing, but they have the same type of emotions that we do. They want companionship, they want love, they want children, but all of them approach it, and they want a belief in something, and they want learning, and they all approach it in a different manner.
What is your process to writing a book like this? Like from the inspiration to the title to actually sitting down and making it happen. What's your process?
Can't tell anyone that. It's just sort of in my mind, and I hear the characters, and I write it down.
Mm-hmm. Do you spend a certain amount of time each day at the computer, or do you use a computer?
Yes.
Is it based on your inspiration of the day? Do you set yourself a time limit?
Yes. I sit down at 2:30 and I write until 4 o'clock. That's it.
And then talk to me about your editing process.
Prolonged.
I hear that's where the real stuff happens, because I've attempted to sit down and even write like little blog posts, and I found myself typing, and then I get a sentence, and then I go, no, that's not right, and I go back and fix it. I feel like I struck gold when I finally hit on, I was watching, I think, a video or something about people who were writing, and they said, really, just sit down and put a piece of paper over the screen and just let it all spill out. Just spelling errors, whatever. If something goes in a different direction, just keep going until either you're out of ideas or you've reached your, time limit for the day or whatever. And then let it sit for a couple of days and go back.
Yes. However, with a novel, it sometimes a little bit longer than that, which is why I said prolong. Sometimes you hit a thing. I do not have writer's block, but sometimes the voices are silent, and I know, and they're nagging at me that I'm going in the wrong direction. I find if I go back and rewrite the first part, then it comes and I can go on. But that still means once I have it finished, I will start back at the first and really edit it. And then I will let it sit, and then I will go back and re-edit it.
Right.
So it's re-edited at least 3 times, sometimes more.
So from start to finish, from concept of this is my idea to my book is on the shelf and I'm going and signing it at places.
It varies. Sometimes it's years, like my Gather the Children. Sometimes it doesn't take that long because I've pulled up all these chapters that I've written previously, like the last of the series of the Chronicles of Makkah. I had several chapters written that I'd done about 25 years prior to that because I knew what these people were going to do.
And how did you get interested in this? It's science fiction, right?
Well, that was the summer. Instead of going to Iowa, I went to stay with my brother, the one that laughed at my story, in San Francisco. I had already read the books that he'd left at home, which he was delighted that I had, and he introduced me to science fiction.
Okay.
I loved it.
Have you ever been down to downtown L.A.? To the last bookstore?
I've been to San Francisco to a lot of places because of my brother Norman, but no, not in L.A. My problem with L.A., I didn't drive through it or go through it until I was older, and when it was so smoggy, I did not want to stay there. I kept the windows of the car rolled up. It was that bad.
Right. Well, I lived down there for about 3.5 years before I moved out here, and there's a wonderful bookstore.
I have heard of it.
The Last Bookstore, and they have an unbelievable science fiction collection up on the 2nd floor. And I imagine now if I went back there, I could probably find a few Mary Collier books in there.
That would be wonderful. I hope so.
I'll have to look the next time I go in. Between your time at the museum and your time writing, what other kinds of things are you doing in the desert to occupy yourself?
Well, it's become a little complicated. My son was ill, not able to work. He moved his family out here because I insisted they'd lost everything.
Oh, gosh.
Finally got him to go to the emergency room. They gave him 2 months to live. He took 7.
Wow.
And his family is still with me. So we're a bit crowded. But it does make it a little more difficult to coordinate things. And plus, I also, before this all happened, had broken my leg, so I have a bar running down it, which definitely limits what I can do.
Sure.
I still do my exercises, however.
That's important.
It sort of makes me self-contained. I cannot go on the long hikes and everything that I once did. I just don't even attempt it.
Right. Do you read still other science fiction?
Well, this is the problem of being a published author. When you find a publisher that's a little bit different than the rest, you're supposed to support each other by reading their books. Unfortunately, I've only run into one other one that writes science fiction, and I've read a lot of novels that I'm not that interested in, but they're good novels, so I rate them on my reviews as to the writing and how it would attract another reader, etc.
Gotcha.
So,
well, and you seem pretty savvy on the internet. Did it just because of the writing you were
because of the writing, but also because of Nintendo. I was actually learning to set up all sorts of things when they decided, oh no, you're not going to do this anymore, and they came down with an IT desk. So unless you had a computer at home and were connected that way, which I did not in the earlier year. So in practice, when I started at Nintendo, there was no internet.
How did you get that job?
I worked for Kelly Girls as a temporary.
Oh my gosh.
They sent me to Nintendo.
I haven't heard of Kelly Girls in so long.
I know. They sent me to Nintendo.
There's probably some people listening that don't even know what that is.
Oh, I'm sure.
That was a temp agency. Oh my gosh. So that's so much fun. So you went in as a temp, and then did they hire you?
Yes, I hadn't been there very long. They offered it to me, but at that time I knew if I accepted, I'd be working some ungodly hours.
Right.
And so I turned it down. They finally offered again, and I accepted, and it turned out to be the best job I ever had.
Wow. How long did you stay there?
I was actually employed there for 12 years. I was almost there a year prior to that. But my mother-in-law was living with us and was not well, and so I was helping to take care of her. My husband had a construction company. I did the books for that. And I could still work 10-hour days, make an hour drive there, an hour drive back, and feed all sorts of people. I do not know how I managed all of that.
Well, we do that as women, don't we? We kind of take on all these things, and sometimes we can because we're strong, but kind of like that saying, if mama's not happy, nobody's happy.
Right.
So you've got to take some time for yourself at some point, try to, whether it's, hiding in the bathroom, reading a book, or
writing a story.
Right, exactly. It kind of takes you out of your reality for a little while anyway, and relaxes you maybe, and relieves some of that stress. Do you play Nintendo games?
Not anymore, but yes, at one time I was a really good Tetris player.
I love Tetris. I have it on my phone. Right now, I think it's sponsored, though, by EA. Yeah, it's free, but I really like that. Yeah, that's one of my favorites. That's awesome. Well, is there anything you would want to say to someone who says they're thinking about moving to the desert?
Come as rapidly as you can. It's a wonderful place. The people are wonderful, and it's a totally new experience, and your life will be enriched.
I really appreciate you coming today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Dawn.
Sure.
I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for listening to the Desert Lady Diaries podcast. I want you to know how much I appreciate you taking the time to tune in. If there was something that enlightened or inspired you, let me know by sharing it with me and the other listeners on the Desert Lady Diaries Facebook page. Next week, Tonalisa Rugas tells us how a Norwegian ends up in the desert, what it's like being an Airbnb host, and talks a bit about Tarot, which she has been studying since childhood. If you're enjoying this podcast, I hope you'll subscribe and share it with a friend. Thanks so much for listening.